UFC Fight Night Nashville, Derrick Lewis versus Texeira is going to be happening Saturday, July 12th at Bridgestone Arena in Nashville, Tennessee. We take a week off from fights after UFC 317. It's a consistent theme. If you've been a fan of the sport for a while, you're not new to experiencing the peaks and valleys of an event like Ilia Topuria versus Charles Oliveira, followed by an event like, to be fair, this could be a lot worse. We could be getting a WMMA main event. Generally, after a fight that big, it's just some contender matchup between two flyweights, or heavyweights in this instance. And heavyweight is so down bad. This match being a headlining fight, Derrick Lewis in the big 2025 is the big running joke here. People are like, why is this happening? Why is he still headlining events? It's just because that we have the top 5 heavyweight, right? Aspinall, Gane, Blades, Pavlovich, Almeida, Volkov is there too. And then right after the top 5, you have Waldo Cortez Acosta, Marcin Tybura, Sergey Spivak, and then at 10, there's 3.5 out of 5 stars in UFC 5, Tai Tuivasa occupying the number 10 spot. This division is getting to be like women's bantamweight level. I think I'd rather watch women's strawweight matchups. Per capita, women's flyweight fights have been better than male heavyweight ones, and it should never be that way. So hopefully they can figure it out. Hopefully Texeira is the future, and we get another great Brazilian prospect at the heavier weight classes. A quick visit back to the canceled matchup graveyard. We only have one canceled fight. It's going to be Atiba Gauthier versus Robert Valentin. I don't know much about Atiba Gauthier. He's a French prospect with a lot of hype on him. He was a round 1 knockout over Jose Medina at 185. Robert Valentin is another showcase fighter. We saw Torres Finney get to do whatever he wanted in this fight against Robert Valentin, and he still chose to just put on a very boring performance. Atiba Gauthier, if he is a dog like people say that he is, he probably would have knocked this guy out. It would have been a great performance. An easy fight to predict this one would have been, but we don't get to see it. The first fight in the prelims is Fatima Kline versus Melissa Martinez. Fatima Kline brutalized Victoria Dudakova on the ground, and she was getting more and more frustrated with her coaches while she was trying to game plan, like from the beginning of the fight to the end of it. And by the time that she had lost by that second round TKO, Dudakova gets up and she slaps her coach. And she like pimp slapped him. It was hilarious to watch on TV. And it was like an open hand, like she was clearly upset too, and the coach was trying to console her in her loss. She was like, and she was speaking Russian to him as well. It was hilarious. But she shouldn't have been too hard on herself. Fatima Kline is actually not a bad opponent to have lost to, because she competed with Jasmine Jasudavicius in her debut, Fatima Kline. And she went to a decision, even though she was grossly undersized. She has technical skills to make up for her lack of stature. The only thing you can mitigate her skills with is having skills yourself and also a frame that nullifies her physical ability, either in the grappling or the stand-up, and that's what Jasmine did. But Jasmine does that to everyone, so. Martinez has wins over Elise Reed and Alice Ardelian, but Alice Ardelian, that fight was a complete and total mess, and she probably should have lost it if there was no questionable reffing that was going on. The UFC believed in Kline enough to give her Jasmine Jasudavicius as a debut opponent, so I think we should probably believe in Fatima Kline enough to beat Melissa Martinez. If you look at resumes, Kline's fights with girls on the same level as Martinez's opponents so far, they get finished. In that fight with Ardelian, Martinez, she lost 2 rounds on the feet to getting outstruck by Ardelian. And then she got a 3rd round TKO robbed by Keith Peterson, who called a low blow. It's not like she won on a technicality, because the scorecards still said 30-27, which was hard for a lot of people to understand. Kline probably wins this effortlessly, because this is a woman who tries to rob wins, predominantly, it seems like. Because she favors herself to be a striker, but Kline is going to be too good. She's going to catch her on the ground, or on the feet, and then on the ground, mounting her, and then TKOing this woman in the 3rd round. Fatima Kline will get this done. The second fight is going to be Mitch Ramirez versus Mike Davis. Ramirez lost to Thiago Moises the way that I thought that Jared Gordon would have. Granted, Mitch Ramirez got leg kick TKO'd in this fight. He was just controlled and then Muay Thai comboed on the feet until his leg gave out, and that was the end of it. In order to beat Mike Davis in the grappling, you have to be a really good wrestler, and you have to be really solid at jiu-jitsu as well, because his grappling is pretty top level. Mike Davis is also very explosive in the stand-up as well. It's just the fight IQ whenever he does face off with people who also know how to wrestle too. But if he's free to work his own grappling game plan, even against a guy like Faraz Ziem, who was handling him on the ground, it's not like that guy didn't get fully caught inside of a calf slicer, and I was rewatching the tape of that fight. Ferociem got his knee blown up by Mike Davis. I'm not sure if... It looks like it was impossible for him to not take any damage to his knee that got caught inside of that calf slicer. Mike Davis is kind of like Terrence McKinney. I think that on an occasion where I spoke with Terrence McKinney, he said that he trains with Mike Davis, and that makes sense. These are two very physically gifted athletes from the perspective of having the intangibles, or the things that you can't coach, per se. I mean, you can develop them through hard work, but power, that quick twitch, the explosiveness, he just has these things. He's very dynamic. Mitch Ramirez does not have better power, he does not have better grappling, and he doesn't have better durability. So it's hard to say totally after only one fight in the UFC. Mike Davis was ring rusted in his last fight. I think it had been like over a year layoff maybe. Mitch Ramirez is going to be battling ring rust this time. Yes, it'll be him with a year plus layoff. This should be a slam dunk for Mike Davis, who trains, again, like I said, with Terrence McKinney. I think Mike Davis is going to win this via round 1 KO, or he'll drop the guy and then sub him. Also, I want to give a belated happy 4th of July to my American audience. I hope that you guys all had a safe and very enjoyable holiday, because I was on my phone and I saw 4 Extra, the guy who wanted to fight Cedric Dumas. He blew his hand off with a firework, and there was a photo of it. Imagine trying to pass someone's guard with a hand that looks like this. Please stay safe, make good decisions. I kind of get Glover Teixeira or Spivak vibes off of Valter Walker with the way that he fights. He seems like a grappler, but I don't know. It's kind of one of these styles where it's difficult to pin down exactly the way that Valter Walker fights, because he fought with Lucas Bresky. I think that was his debut and he lost, and that was a complete stand-up fight. And then he started taking people down and he was beating them. He beat one of the Tafas, I think it was Junior, who's going to be fighting on this card as well. And then he beat up Dontel Mays, which is kind of like a stat padding win. Kennedy Nzechekwu is a guy who somehow always gets to knockouts in the fights that he wins. This guy's knocked out Carlos Olberg whenever he was a 205er. And he has some other really good wins at this weight class too. I never really get mad whenever he fights anyone in the UFC, because the chances of his fights going to decision every time are super low. Kennedy Nzechekwu is a freaking bomber. Fights on the stand-up often see Valter Walker lose decisions very often. Whenever he wrestles, he can get to submissions, but he hasn't fought enough in the UFC and against widely varying talent to know if it can work against everyone or if it's only just some people. The current state of things, I'm sure he could get pretty far with a pure grappling game plan. Maybe about as far as Jailton Almeida got before he got knocked out by Curtis Blades. Kennedy isn't the largest heavyweight either since he moved up from 205, but he'll still be larger than Valter Walker. Kennedy can spark out Valter unless the first thing that the brother of Johnny does is shoot a double or single leg. He needs to come out and Hamzat this dude if he wants to stay in this fight, because in the stand-up, Kennedy Nzechekwu might hurt him badly. I think there's a very high likelihood of this going down. And as far as takedown defense goes, I was looking at his stats and his fights too. He does a really good job of controlling the clinch on the cage and digging for underhooks and making sure that he doesn't get dumped. Nobody's really shooting for takedowns on him, but he still has like an 81% takedown defense, which is pretty good for the heavier weight classes, since none of those guys know how to wrestle. Maybe Valter is that 1/5, that 20% of people who can take him down. Dude's only been subbed by Paul Craig, and if you're a 205 fighter who's been in the UFC for more than like 5 years, who hasn't been subbed by Paul Craig? It's really not that big of a deal. I think that Nzechekwu is going to win this fight via round 2 TKO. He will be forced into a ground sequence with Valter. He will catch Valter in one of these ground sequences, and we're going to get some very sharp ear shots to the side of the head to finish this one. The ref is going to pull Kennedy Nzechekwu off of Valter Walker, and he's going to get up and put both of his fists in the air. It's going to be glorious. Lauren Murphy versus Eduarda Mora. I don't know why, but I believe in Lauren Murphy's supremacy at women's flyweight. She's getting old too. I shouldn't be rooting for her, but I still am. And I was so shattered by the way that she lost to Shevchenko. I have this inference that being a recovering drug addict is low-key the best base for jiu-jitsu or grappling. There was this one time I went to a 10th Planet jiu-jitsu gym by my house. I mean, I frequent that place for the open mat rules. And there was this guy, we'll call him Billy. And Billy, he is a recovering coke addict, and he just got out of rehab in Mexico, like Nick Diaz, dude. And this dude chokes me so much and so fast with such like crazy techniques. This is the first time I'd ever been buggy choked before, and I didn't even know how to defend it or do anything to it. Her brain is altered. The brain chemistry, it's been twisted up to the point where she sees things on the ground as possible that other people just don't see or can't visualize like her. Lauren Murphy's got to be the only lady in this weight class still losing to Jessica Andrade, and she did this in 2023 whenever it was even more uncool to do this. Mora has only shown up to out-grapple girls who are strikers, and she lost to Denise Gomez, who's a power puncher with good Brazilian jiu-jitsu. She had just flatlined Elise Reed. It was beautiful. Domestic violence between men and women, totally uncool. But in the setting of MMA where women are able to hurt other women, and they do, Mora's last win over Veronica Hardy is a good one, but Hardy is half the grappler that Murphy is. Murphy is going to be battling ring rust off of a 1-year layoff too, but I just think that the jiu-jitsu is going to be so much better than Eduarda Mora's. And we've seen with all of the legends who are good grapplers, Lauren Murphy is not Damian Maia level, but I would say she's comparable to a dude like Gunnar Nelson, and there is no Kevin Holland in this weight class, so she's just going to be able to grapple. And that's what she always has done, and she's beaten these types of fighters by decision her entire career. I think that Murphy will have the better but less powerful stand-up. She's also really old, I think, too, either close to or over 40, 41 years old. She's going to be worse at wrestling than Mora, but she's going to have a better bottom game than Mora. So if she doesn't end up spinning this entire fight on her back, she will likely win a decision by getting to reversals or being able to get back to her feet and keeping this fight in the stand-up. Risky pick. She's very old, but I want to see her win, man. This is my girl. Jake Matthews versus Chidi and Njokuani. Chidi and Njokuani is a special case of a guy who's come... I guess, okay, so look. Whenever you're changing weight classes, a lot of the time it's a bad idea to go down. Especially if you're a 155er and you're going to featherweight, that is low-key career suicide sometimes. And if you're a featherweight and you're going to bantamweight, that usually doesn't bode well a lot of the times. I would say the featherweight to lightweight pipeline is very good. And we often see fighters at 185 have success at 205 too whenever they can't make middleweight and the weight cut's too much for them. But one thing I've been noticing lately is that fighters going down weight classes have been winning. And we saw Gabe Green drop from 170 to 155 and be successful there. We see Chidi and Njokuani drop from 185 down to 170, and he's successful there. Brian Battle used to be Pooh Bear before he became the Butcher, and he was a 185er and is now a welterweight. These are good moves. Buckley as well. If you're a 185er and it's just like you don't have much business being there, come to welterweight. You're probably going to hit super hard, and you're going to be a lot more physically capable than a lot of the other 170s who have been 170s their entire career. They don't know that there's a matrix to how hard they can be hitting. Jake Matthews is a guy who usually puts on mediocre performances, but only loses to elite level fighters at welterweight like Morales and Brady. And it's funny because he's only getting beaten by these guys by decision. People wanted to say that the Morales hype train was over after this fight because he didn't knock out Jake Matthews, but Jake Matthews just didn't allow himself to be KO'd. And Sean Brady got Jake Matthews, but only because he stayed really persistent on his game plan, and that was still a round 3 submission. So Jake Matthews is no slouch on the ground, and he has high survivability in the cage too. You gotta knock this guy out. And not a lot of people are doing this. If you do sign a contract to fight Jake Matthews, there's a very high likelihood that that fight is going to go to decision. Matthews' only questionable loss was to Matthew Simmelsberger, but it was while he was streaking Matthew Simmelsberger, Semi the Jedi, and it was still just unanimous decision. It's not like this guy got knocked out by the dude. Jake Matthews recovered from his loss to Michael Morales with a win over Philip Rowe, and then also a win over Francisco Prieto, which I thought that he'd lose. Francisco Prieto is an Argentinian kickboxer, a lot like Esteban Aribovic, and he's very good at fighting. So I thought that he might have knocked out Jake Matthews, but he just got grappled the whole time, and it was easy for Matthews to win. Chidi and Njokuani just recently KO'd Alessio Zaleski dos Santos in round 2 of their fight, and that's a very good win. That guy's beaten like Colby Covington. Alessio Zaleski dos Santos is one of those fighters. He's like Brazilian Michael Johnson, where he's just a middle-of-the-road contender, but for some reason, he has wins over legends, either before they were fully developed, or he just has this ability to catch people lacking, and he does. And he is still a crafty veteran, winning these fights late into his career. And Chidi and Njokuani knocked him out. And that was not something that I was expecting to see. So hopefully he can give us another unlikely outcome in this fight. In the way of the grappling, Chidi and Njokuani is going to be way too big to be taken down. And he'll be catching Jake with cleaner and more powerful shots because of the size of his frame. I think that Njokuani via decision is going to be a good pick here. I would love to see a knockout personally. He definitely has the power to deliver on that. But Willie, Michael Morales didn't. So I think that we're going to see a decision in this fight. Moving on, the next one is going to be Max Griffin versus Chris Curtis. Okay. Chris Curtis is in UFC 5. I like to use him in the video game. And that's why I'm really underwhelmed by his performances at middleweight. I really thought that he would have won more of those fights. He dropped fights to contenders like Kopylov, Hermanson, and Gastelum. His best win at 185 was over Buckley, who was on a loss streak at the time. And then he cut to 170 after this in 2022, and he hasn't fought at middleweight since then. Maybe Chris Curtis should have done the same thing this whole time. Losses to Neil Magny and Michael Chiesa for Griffin means that Curtis could likely win this just by clinching Max to death if he wanted to do that. Morales had Griffin hitting feet across the cage. His physical advantages neutralized the takedown. Chris Curtis doesn't have the stature of Morales, but he's going to have the strength of Morales and then some coming down from middleweight. So the way that I think this one plays out is Curtis can't get wrestled because he's going to be too strong. On the feet, his shots have greater ability to stop fights, and that's just going to be because he's coming down a weight class. So I could see this being a late accumulation of damage, stoppage. I really just don't know what type of power this dude is going to be hitting with. We could see this come as a round 1 KO. I'm going to take the round 3-1 though, just because I do hope to see a lot of his skills before this fight ends. But I also want to see a knockout too. So round 3 KO for Chris Curtis. That's going to take us up to the main card. The first fight on the main card is going to be Junior Tafa versus Tuco Tokkos. So Tuco Tokkos, he built up Umar Sy before he fought Alonzo Minifield. And Umar Sy aggressively wrestled Tuco Tokkos and subbed him really fast. But Umar Sy losing a decision to Alonzo Minifield the way that he did, it makes me about 99.9% certain that Tokkos gets chinned in this fight by Junior Tafa. And in general, Junior Tafa and his little brother too, and your big brother. Both of the Tafas are about 1/3 of the boxer that Ming Yang Zhang is. And each of them are not the greatest at the other parts of MMA that aren't boxing. But if anything, they have KO power. And in a lot of instances, that's good enough. And it will get the job done. Tokkos can get boomed on, and he probably does by Tafa, who is now a 205-pounder. If this guy is taking his career seriously and he actually learned how to fight, he may be dangerous. Because at heavyweight, this guy was nothing but just a bunch of raw physical attributes. And he would win fights sometimes, and he would lose fights other times. Hopefully he's dialed in. Junior Tafa has lost a technical stand-up fight against Mo Usman at heavyweight, which all things considered, Mo Usman at heavyweight is better as an outside of the rankings fighter than Tuco at light heavyweight is, filling the same role. Tafa's only path to victory in this fight is going to be a brutal KO. It doesn't change from any other time that he fights, and it can always be done. So I think that he will secure it in round 1 of this fight. We're going to get... Does he do the shoey? Does he do shoeys? The next fight is Vitor Petrino versus Austen Lane. Thank you, Vitor Petrino. Vitor Petrino deserves $1 million for moving up to heavyweight because we need more heavyweights. He's going to be undersized a bit at 6'2", but it's alright. It's okay. Because the type of fighter who gets guillotined by Anthony Smith in round 1 and TKO'd by Dustin Jacoby at light heavyweight, he becomes the 265-pound champion. I don't know why, but I just feel like it works that way. Let's get him on a title fast track immediately. Put him through the same pacing as Robelis to Spain. Start with Austen Lane and see how he does. Austen Lane is basically the same fighter as Dontel Mays. And that's the reason why they cut Dontel Mays, is because they already have Austen Lane who does the same thing. They just gatekeep outside of the ranking. And they fight upcoming contenders just to see if they are who they say they are. And in the event of Robelis to Spain, he was not. If Vitor Petrino sleeps Austen Lane in round 1, he instantly becomes the most interesting prospect in the division. In my opinion, I think that the UFC should draft every failed hype train at 205 to 265 and force him to become heavyweights. Because what are all of those dudes doing down there, just squatting around? Umar Sy, you better become a heavyweight. Julius Walker, you better move up to heavyweight. We need you guys at 265. The big hang-up must either be that they don't want to get fat or they don't want to get knocked out. Because those are the only two things that you make the compromise for if you are going to become a heavyweight. and you're not like 6'7". 6'7". Vitor Petrino, he has a really easy opponent. He's going to be motivated to win. 2-loss streak at light heavyweight. Anthony Smith, and then Dustin Jacoby. I don't know why I'm seeing Dewan Lane. It says Austen there. I think this guy might have changed his name to Dewan. And I don't have any opinion on that. I think that Vitor Petrino still knocks him out in the first round. And I'm rooting for Vitor Petrino something serious because we need more heavyweights, dude. We need more heavyweights like the Dickens. Nate Landwehr versus Morgan Charriere at featherweight. All right, so Morgan Charriere, he's a relatively complete martial artist. You must pass the threshold of technical skill in order to win against. Charriere's most recent losses are going to be to Shep Mariscal and also Nathaniel Wood. But each are better at fighting than Nate when all things are considered. Nate the Train is a veteran who competes at a rung below the contenders who have beaten Morgan. Shep Mariscal is a wicked grappler, and he's a good striker too, and he's insanely violent. So that's the reason why he beat Morgan Charriere, just by being hard to contain. Shep Mariscal is an ungovernable fighter in the cage. And Nathaniel Wood, he's just really technically good. He's not necessarily as nasty or vicious as Shep Mariscal, but he throws things with bad intentions. And his output is great, and he knows whenever to go and whenever to do certain things, whenever to wrestle, whenever to strike. That's the reason why he beat Morgan Charriere. Nate Landwehr is just kind of going with the flow of the fight. It ends up working out for him sometimes, like in the Jamal Emmers matchup. Other times he gets fried, like against Dooho Choi. But it usually takes a while because he's in there just flowing. I think he got knocked out in the Dooho Choi fight in the third round. Morgan Charriere has explosiveness, which can produce a KO. Charriere, he just doesn't have the ability to lose certain moments of a fight. Like Nate Landwehr, he's good at this. He's good with going down even a couple of rounds to get to the point where he needs to be in order to start working his game plan. You saw in fights like Onama with Nate Landwehr or Ludovic Kline, which are fights that I didn't suppose that he would win, and he still did win against these fighters. That's an IQ thing. I think that you have to be smarter than Nate Landwehr in order to beat him, and that's kind of a maybe for Morgan Charriere just because he got tricked pretty bad by Shep Mariscal and Nathaniel Wood in the grappling positions. I just don't think that Nate Landwehr has that same level of craft, even though he is a veteran. Those guys are just, they're different. Morgan Charriere is going to be too physical. I think that he wins via round 1 submission. Calvin Kattar at number 14 versus Steve Garcia at featherweight. Somebody get this man Steve Garcia ranking. Garcia is a fighter who wants to hurt people, and he loves fights with opponents who don't do a lot in the cage. Calvin Kattar can get caught playing on 500 ping. You know, like whenever your friend is lagging, you look over at their character and they're just running in place, and you see them and they're holding their pickaxe and they're just like, they're floating in the air, their feet are both off of the ground, and they're just holding the running position in midair. Or they're T-posing like in Gmod. Calvin Kattar can get caught doing the same things in the octagon. He's a relatively inactive fighter from the perspective of, like, do you hit people? He fights, sure. I mean, I guess his activity has been better before whenever he was winning, like, Fighter of the Year and stuff. But in the cage, he doesn't do a whole lot. So that's why I'm thinking that Steve Garcia likely does something really sinister to Calvin Kattar, while Kattar just watches him do it. Max Holloway set a significant strike record on Calvin Kattar, and Kattar just kind of stood there until this record was achieved. In the Aljo fight, I mean, the threat of the takedown always does weird things to strikers, but he just stood there until he was getting lifted up in the air and dumped. Steve Garcia is on a nice finish streak as well, so if we do get to see Calvin Kattar get flash KO'd, it's going to be an interesting watch because it doesn't happen very often. Steve Garcia isn't the type of dude who's delivering us like these Ilia Topuria walk-off knockouts, like, oh my god, he's not moving, look at him, he doesn't know what his name is anymore. They're almost worse. It's like if somebody were to take a 2x4 and to smack you across your face with it just hard enough to break the bridge of your nose, but not to knock you out. It's these types of strikes where it's like they get hit with the knee, or it's a body shot into a lead hook, or it's a punch that cuts their eyebrow, or it lands here and it cuts them. They take some form of damage, the opponents of Steve Garcia, and they're like, ow, 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 and they grab their head and they fall on their side and they ball up. It's not like, it's like they get hit with something and it freaks them out. Like the Malcazal Costa fight, you saw this. I think there was a sub that ended up finishing this fight. But before this RNC was wrapped up, it was just a knee. This guy is always focused on how he can hit his opponent. It was a cheeky knee that he slipped in the middle of this combo while he had Melky pinned against the cage, and then he ended up getting the choke from there. And there was just blood everywhere. Steve Garcia's fights are so gross. He's a really interesting fighter to watch because he is so violent. Kattar has to jab to stop Garcia from getting going, but Steve is much more deranged than Giga Chikadze, and he's going to be prioritizing finishing this fight as soon as possible. How I see this going is Calvin Kattar is going to fight tooth and nail on the ground or on the feet to stop himself from being finished, and it's just going to happen regardless. I think that Steve Garcia is going to drop Calvin Kattar, and he's going to TKO him on the ground in round 2. Steve Garcia is a nightmarish fighter. I'm not gonna lie to you. They shouldn't make these guys this mean and angry. He trains out of Mike Winklejohn Academy, and he does remind me a little bit of John Jones with the way, John Jones be talking about the most malicious and dangerous techniques I have. That's literally all Steve Garcia throws. Just the most malicious and dangerous techniques that he throws. I don't know what they're teaching these guys at the Winklejohn Academy. Stephen Thompson at number 12 versus Gabriel Bonfim at welterweight. Ishmael's been papped up by Sadikov, but Gabriel was always better than he was. I always thought that Gabriel Bonfim was better than Ishmael Bonfim. Once upon a time, Nicholas Dalby whooped Gabriel Bonfim via round 2 TKO in 2023. Dalby would have been at the time 4 years younger than Stephen Thompson, who is currently 42. Nicholas Dalby TKO'd Gabriel Bonfim whenever he was 38 years old. But as I watched the footage of Gabriel Bonfim, his striking is so plotty. It's the perfect style of fighter for Wonderboy to masterclass. All Wonderboy needs to be able to do is demonstrate that he's at least 3/4 of the fighter that we are used to watching see win these decisions over these fighters who want to get into the striking chess match with him, like Kevin Holland or like Vicente Luque. I'm calling back to vintage performances right now just because he hasn't been winning a lot lately, because people have just been wrestling him, and he could just get wrestled. That's how Bonfim wins this fight, as he grapples Wonderboy. And if he does get choked again, Stephen Wonderboy Thompson better retire. I don't want to ever see him fight again if he gets choked in this fight. I thought Wonderboy could also catch this guy and stop the fight fast too, so I wouldn't put that past him either. We got to see some good movement. We got to see Stephen Wonderboy Thompson actually packing a little bit of power into these shots in order to make them mean something. It's an uphill battle for sure, but I think that I'm going to say that Stephen Thompson still wins via round 1 KO. Going back to what I said about power, a lot of things that produce KOs is going to be positioning and timing. As we saw in the Grant Dawson fight against Bobby Green, you can just get touched and die if it's in the right place at the right time. So Stephen Thompson is great at timing. He's great at accurately placing his shots. So this is the dude who can make something happen in this fight. He's 42, but it's a good 42. The main event, Derrick Lewis at number 9 versus Taliesin Teixeira at number 13. This is going to be a heavyweight fight. If Derrick Lewis still chins untested prospects at heavyweight on 2 win streaks, I'm going to throw my clipboard like a coach who just gave up a touchdown. That's literally going to be my reaction. My headphones and my clipboard are getting thrown in the ground. If Derrick Lewis gets slimed out in Nashville, Tennessee, I will also be sad, but we need new title challengers, so it'll be in the name of bringing up a dude who is probably going to end up getting to the belt if he beats Derrick Lewis by knockout, because that's just kind of what happens. We saw with Cyril Gane and also Tai Tuivasa, if you want to count it, he fought for an interim title. I'm glad that Teixeira seems relatively serious about his career at heavyweight and has the frame to fight anyone in the division. He's kind of like a cross between JDS and Stefan Struve a little bit. That's what he reminds me of. But if Taliesin Teixeira is just Austen Lane with a few extra steps, Derrick Lewis is going to show all of us this. But the thing that gives me hope is the performance that Taliesin Teixeira logged against Justin Tafa. He knocked him out with a combo that I think would finish any rotund heavyweight fighter in the UFC. It was a Muay Thai knee to an elbow, perfectly placed, perfectly thrown. Derrick Lewis in 2025, Tuivasa, and the Tafas, I think they're all interchangeable as fighters in this division. If you can beat one of those guys, there's a good chance you probably beat the other two. Teixeira is going to win this fight via round 1 KO, and that's going to be the nail in the coffin on Derrick Lewis. He can just become an automotive guy. If he likes cars, open up a garage, dude. I know there's a lot of dudes who would get their vehicles serviced and performance upgrades done by Derrick Lewis. You're a trusted name. You don't even need to prove anything in your field. People are just going to give their business to you. He doesn't need to continue to just get pieced up. I'm sure he's making a lot of money, though. So you do what makes you happy, Derrick. So these are going to be a recap of all my predictions. We're 3 weeks away from Albazi versus Taira, the bottom right corner. We're going to get this card. Then we're going to get UFC 318, Dustin Poirier versus Max Holloway. And then off the cusp of that, we are going to have Tatsuro Taira versus Amir Albazi. And then after this, I think that we're getting Dricus du Plessis versus Hamzat Chimaev. And then we're going to be getting a really nice China card too. Somewhere in the middle of all of this, the Abu Dhabi card with Rainer de Ritter and Robert Whittaker is also going to be going down too. So yeah, those are going to be all my predictions, you guys. I think I cooked, honestly. I think that this is going to go well. So please stay tuned. It should be a good weekend of fights. It'll be something to watch, you know. I'll take what I can get after no weekend of UFC. I'm kind of suffering right now. Might play some Fortnite, I don't know. Might go for a run. I don't even know what to do with myself without fights. So please do like, comment, and subscribe if you made it to this point in the video. I will catch you fellas in the next one. Please have a wonderful day.